what's happening. Setting up your meeting for Facebook Live.
Oh, meeting is now streaming live on Facebook. Look at
There
that.
we go. I need to refresh all of this, doo-doo, which is probably happening. Oh, here we are. It says it's now streaming on Facebook. Oh, there we are. Look at that. I see us now. Ha ha! Hooray! Well, hello, Facebook world. This is Siobhan Brumbelow, Associate Artistic Director at Elm Street. And with Elm Stream today, we're so happy that we were able to, one, produce a show such as Helvetica. And if you haven't already checked it out, you should check out our webpage and see the performance that we were able to record since all of the things that have been happening around the world, we were unable to fulfill the rest of the performance. But I am lucky enough to have the playwright here, the person who wrote the play himself, Mr. Will Coleman. Yay! Round of applause.
Hello.
I'm sure everybody is doing this right now. At least I am. Thank you so much for being here. And you're all the way in
Chicago. There's
Chicago.
I should say. Yeah.
Yeah, Chicago. So, Will, you know what? I'm going to start off really cheesy and ask you, tell us a little bit about yourself, Will.
Okay. My name is Will Coleman. I'm a playwright. Gosh, what do you want to know? Like,
well, let's start off with what made you want to be a playwright.
I don't know. You know, when I think I had this this forgotten memory when I started applying to grad school. You know, I had to write an essay, and that was, I think, one of the questions. And I suddenly remembered writing a Winnie the Pooh play in second grade, which I would like to think it was in crayon, but it probably wasn't. And like just become like I can't imagine that I'd seen a play at that point, unless you count Teenage Mutant Ninja Turtles on Tour as a play.
Yes, I want to see that.
Okay. It's more like a concert play hybrid,
Right.
It's not really a musical. But I got this idea that I wanted to do this play, and so my second grade teacher was very enthusiastic about it, and I put together this whole thing that I kind of organized, and I'm sure it was just, you know, me remembering stories of Winnie the Pooh and kind of like creating it with these other second graders, but I definitely did that and then forgot about it for years. So I think that was the first thing. But I was an actor as a kid. You know, I was always doing all the high school and community theater stuff when I was a kid. I wanted to be an actor until high school, really.
Yeah.
And then I kind of realized that being an actor is really hard.
Yeah.
Or harder than it was too hard for me to continue to want to do it. Like the stuff that I wasn't good at was like, you know, like I was really good at cold reading, but not great at like monologues or auditions or anything like that, or like, and all the business part of like, you know, meeting people and like going to like the huge cattle calls and UPTAs and like headshots and like sliding your headshot underneath the door of the hotel room. And I did not want to do that. And so when I went to undergrad, I was a directing major. And so that's what I did my undergrad in. And it wasn't really until my senior year of undergrad that I wrote a whole play for a playwriting class. I'd always written like prose though, like I was always writing stories when I was a kid. And I was always writing something, whether it was mostly movies. Like at that, you know, I made a movie in undergrad. It was a colossal failure. We had professional equipment, we had like a location, we wrote it knowing we were going to shoot it, so it was the whole thing. It was a full-length movie. It was an absolute nightmare. And so basically it's just me trying to find the easiest artistic expression that I can, maybe. The thing about a play is like you can write it and then like do it almost immediately, you know, like it's very different from a film, where a film requires like so many people and so much money to get anywhere close to what you envision in your head. And with a play, and my plays especially are so minimalist, it can go from concept to creation very quickly. So I think that's what attracts me about the theater in general. And I always, I've been acting and on stage since I was like 6 years old. So I'm more familiar with theater. And so yeah, the theater is definitely my favorite like thing to do. Like a lot of friends I know are trying to write screenplays or trying to get jobs writing for TV, and like, not that I would turn that down, anyone listening, but I definitely, my favorite place is the theater.
Yeah, there's something special about live.
Yeah,
Just
for sure.
things happening live. So tell me a little bit about some of the plays you've written, maybe besides Helvetica. Like,
Sure.
Tell me a couple of your favorites, maybe.
Gosh. Well, my favorite plays are all the ones that haven't been produced, obviously. There's an all ages musical that I've written called Squid Hunt that I'm still working on occasionally, which it's about a little boy whose parents are killed in a squid attack, and this island every month gets attacked by this giant squid, and it like kills people. So he sets off with a cowardly cook, an ex-pirate, and a drunken sea captain to hunt down the squid and bring it to justice. And it's a musical, and it's all kind of like sea shanty-ish kind of stuff.
That's awesome.
It's not there, and it's musicals especially. Like I am a composer as well, and I am really
nice.
But the thing about musicals is, unless you have any kind of traction, for me at least, it's very difficult to try to like work on that exclusively. It's just lazy, I guess. Like everything keeps coming back to, it's just easier.
Do you find yourself hopping from play to play as you're writing, or do you like sit down and go, I'm going to finish this right now?
Oh, definitely. I work on one thing at a time, and like in between, stuff, I'll go back and do draft revisions and stuff. So like I'll do a first draft on something and then work on something else and then go back before I do another draft or revisions or anything, unless it goes immediately into a reading or something. So
yeah. So how many projects do you currently have on the table, but like draft, final, all of those things?
I mean, I don't think any draft is final. Like I've revised Helvetica. Like Helvetica's had like 10 productions now, and I've revised it every time pretty much.
Wow.
Nikki was sending me text messages and she goes, "Is this line right?" I'm like, "No, that line's not right. That's terrible. Why would I write that?"
For those of you tuning in, Nikki was our director. No, you're fine. Nikki was our director for Helvetica, the production that, if you have seen on our website, doing that. And Will and Nikki are good friends as well. You were telling me Nikki was your teacher at one point.
Yeah, she was. She taught in my grad school. She taught theater for young audiences, and I took that class, and actually I wrote Squid Hunt in that class originally. So,
that's awesome.
And she was my thesis advisor later on a different play, which is the most lamentable tragedy of John Wilkes Booth. It's this epic, like it's 3 hour long, like Shakespearean, like it's kind of like the idea of like a traditional Shakespearean tragedy. It's 5 acts, but it's all about John Wilkes Booth and the kind of the conspiracy around the Lincoln assassination. It's a rough sell,
Yeah.
like you have to, it was hard to write, and it's very difficult. Like, and I spent so long on that, because it was my thesis for grad school. This was last year. And it's so difficult to spend so much time in such a terrible, like, environment, like of this horrible person. So it's, I'm trying to write a farce now. That's what I'm working on right now. Just the silliest, goofy, like one of my friends called me and she goes, "Hey, let's write something together." I'm like, "Yes." And like, she tried to convince me to write about coronavirus for like 2 days. Like, I absolutely do not want to write about coronavirus. No. And nobody wants to see a play about coronavirus. Like,
not yet, too soon.
This whole thing finally blows over and people go out back to the theater again, and nobody wants to see a play about coronavirus. I promise you.
Oh boy.
So we're writing the goofiest thing we can think of right now. That's how
what's the goofiest thing you can think of?
It's a farce. farce about White House staffers and the entertainment world kind of coming together. It's set backstage in a late night show. It's all set in the green room.
Nice.
So it's just like neither of us write anything like that ever. You know, both of our plays are very dark. This is I mean, I guess I'm announcing this. If anybody, we started it 3 days ago.
But if anybody wants to,
yeah, if anybody's familiar with Erin Lane, she's the playwright I'm writing it with, and we've never written a play together. And she and I both write really dark, like sad stuff. So we wanted to do something completely different.
Well, we loved Helvetica. Obviously, as part of our season selection, we read through all of the shows and figure out the shows that fit the best alongside other shows to make a whole package so that we go ups and downs. We laugh, we cry. And Helvetica was such a moving piece to us. And Nikki actually introduced it to us. But I would love to know more about what inspired you to write Helvetica in the first place. Like where did that starting point come off with? Who's Helvetica to you? That kind of thing.
Sure.
I would love to know that answer.
I mean, I've always been interested in children's literature. I've got some, halfway finished children's novels that I've written on my own, and childhood specifically is a theme I go back to constantly. And because I write, all of my plays are kind of, magical realism set in a void, like narrated, like imagination scapes, like all of the plays are like that. And so childhood, kind of tends to come up in something like that. So this was it was written for a deadline when I was it comes back to grad school again. When I was in grad school, every April 15th, we had to submit a brand new play that we had not written in any class and no one had seen before. And so I always try to write something like grandiose like this. I wanted to write a Shakespearean version of the John Wilkes Booth story, right?
Yeah.
But like, who has the time to do the research and like all of that in order to get it done? So for one April 15th play, I gave up on my heavily researched idea that year, and around January or February, I just suddenly had this idea of this little girl and her stuffed bear, and the stuffed bear tells the story. And so it just kind of came from that. I think anybody who's seen it can see the relationship from Calvin and Hobbes. Like Calvin and Hobbes was definitely a big influence. I was super into those as a kid, and I remember like going on these long car rides with my parents and me reading Calvin and Hobbes in the back seat and like asking my parents to explain this to me, 'cause, like, so sometimes it gets pretty philosophical, and it's hard to, it's not exactly, there's a 6-year-old in it, but it's not meant for 6-year-olds.
Right.
So all of that was just kind of a synthesis, and I'm also, fascinated by the character. Like, this is might not be entirely true, but for now I'll say this is my only play about a writer. Like, everybody writes about writers. And so I wanted to have at least one, play about writing, and to try to get the creative process as kind of the way that I see it. If that's not too cheesy, and death. And so like creativity and childhood and death are kind of like my thing, I would say. Like, I tend to come back to those things because they're, I mean, gosh, that's so much, that's all of life, really. Like, to me at least. So that's where I was thinking, and that's kind of where I ended up. And then there's a lot of revision. Like, the first version of the play is a lot different from where it is now. So
how was it different? Can I ask? Like, what were the differences?
Well, I guess it's not that different. There's nothing like, I mean, the basic structure was always the same. Like, it was always 3 actors and all of that. But to me, it's changed the most out of my plays, really. Like my play, when I write, I tend to like pre-write a lot and think about a play for years, so by the time it becomes the first draft, it doesn't change a whole lot from that first incarnation. Basically just kind of character interactions and the way people treated one another. The character of the mother changed a lot. The character of the husband changed a lot. I would say both of those characters are probably emotionally very different in the original draft. I'm sorry to the actor who plays the husband. In general,
we love
always.
James.
Of course. And I'm sorry to all the many wonderful people who have played the husband, but trying to make him more sympathetic and trying to find reasons why she would bother with him, throughout has been something that's I think hopefully been added to and changed in every draft. The scene, he wasn't originally in the party scene, for example, at all. It was just her and the illustrator. And so trying to find like some moments where it seems like they like each other in that relationship, I think really kind of help it out, because otherwise it just makes her look weak, because why would she be with him,
Yeah. So who do you find yourself most relating to as far as the character goes?
No, Helvetica for sure.
Helvetica?
Definitely, yeah. That first the argument, or the argument, well, the first date scene where they're like talking about the things that the unpopular opinions they have, like that's I'm Helvetica in the whole thing. That's where
all
those
of those opinions are yours.
Yes.
You have created Helvetica.
Yeah, some of those opinions are wrong, I will agree, but they are still ones that I hold.
Well, for those of you tuning in, we love having him here, Will Coleman, playwright for Helvetica. If you have any questions, if you've seen the show, our version, or if you've read it or seen any production of, if you have any questions for him as a playwright or about Helvetica, please feel free to comment on that in our Facebook chat right now. And as that continues, I do want to turn to a little bit. Some people have been writing about, writing together and playwrights, that we need to stick together. Obviously, we're in a unique time right now, just with everything going on in the world, and doing interviews online like this, which is wonderful. And you as a playwright, do you solely just do playwriting work, or do you do other things as an artist? And second part of that question, how has this affected you, and what is there to do to help this artist community? Just curious.
Yeah, creatively, no, I don't really do anything else other than write. I write a novel, and I write plays. I have a day job, and I am very lucky that I am still getting paid for now from my day job. I haven't written anything until 3 days ago, when my friend and I started writing. I hadn't written anything in months, really. Not since probably the new year. Like, I had these ideas, and I'm like pre-writing and like trying to like work out characters and stuff, but not actually writing at all. And it's also winter in Chicago, so it's difficult because it's quite cold here.
Yeah.
Not right now, it's actually fine, but it's difficult. So especially because I would always write in a cafe. Like I wrote all of Helvetica in the cafe. I have to get out of the house. Like, I have a really hard time like getting, like, I don't know who's credited with saying this for the quote is, I hate writing, I like having written.
Yeah. Like,
it's nice to have it over with, but like once you start writing, it's fine. It's just, deciding to start writing, that's the hard thing. So yeah, this is really been rough, because like I can't even get out of the house to go and write. I've thought about going out on the back porch. Maybe I'll try that. But there are some people who are doing some stuff. I'm a playwright in residence with a theater company in New York that's put together, like, they've put together a whole lot of like programs and like stuff for their subscribers, much like Elm Street, I think. They're just trying to stay engaged as much as possible, what with their season completely canceled. So they put together a Playwright weekly Zoom meeting. And so every Saturday we're doing a full reading of a play. And then every Sunday the playwrights are having like a meeting where we talk about like how to write stuff. We're like amongst ourselves reading like little short sections of stuff that we're working on. And we started doing prompts. So I have pages due next Sunday for them, which is great because I need somebody to tell me like, you have to turn this in by now, like, or I need a deadline.
Oh, you need a deadline or you'll procrastinate forever.
I mean, like I've never missed a deadline. Like I'm always going to hit the deadline, and I write really fast, but I need pressure, I think.
Yes, I would agree. As an artist, that's something that I need all the time, is like, oh, I got to get this done or else it's never going to happen.
Yeah.
I do have a question. So the lovely little girl who played past Helvetica and her dad were related.
Right. Yeah, that's so cool.
They have a question for you. First, they want to thank you because they love Helvetica and they thought it was beautiful.
Thank you for doing it.
Yeah, and Evie wanted to ask how you come up with your ideas for plays. So what inspires you to write the stories, like your Squid play or any of the other stories? How do you come up with those ideas?
Gosh, I don't know. You know, sometimes it's from a very specific thing. Like my play that I was telling you earlier in the green room was in rehearsals, and we've moved it. Like it didn't get canceled. It's moved to January. The whole cast is on board. It's going to be fine. It worked out pretty much the best way it could have, I think, considering everything. But so that play it's called Krugazor. Very specifically came from a podcast. I listened to a lot of podcasts, and this podcast, the name of the podcast is 99% Invisible, and it's essentially about architecture and design. But they kind of use that as a way to do a story about anything they want, really. And so this episode was about Soviet design and like the very specific things that were made in the Soviet Union for everyone, that were made for general use. You know, like everyone had the same telephone, everyone had the same TV, like all of these things were uniform throughout the Soviet Union. And one of the things they talked about was a magazine with a record in it. So what that was it was this music magazine and culture. They had articles about everything. It started to turn more and more about music as it went on. There were 6 records in it, like really thin, what they call flexi disc vinyl records. And originally they had interviews on them. They had like nature sounds, stuff you were supposed to listen to. Like you could listen to the interview and then read the article while you listen to this. But at a certain point, they kind of started, sneaking isn't the right word because the government knew about it, obviously, but they just kind of didn't care because it was this one thing. Like Western rock music was banned in the Soviet Union for a long time. And this magazine was the way that Soviet teens first heard most Western rock music. Like Blondie was in there, Elton John, the Rolling Stones, all the way up to, Madonna, Nirvana, stuff like that. So, that very specifically came from that idea, but most of the time it's much harder to say than that. Like with Helvetica, it just kind of came out of nowhere. Like it comes as you're writing sometimes, like a lot of people say the characters write themselves, and I think that's silly. I mean, no, you write it, the characters don't write it.
They are your characters.
Yeah, but and like especially something that's structured this way, you have to like decide what you're going to do, and like they're in a very specific order for a reason, and I do plot all that out beforehand. Like I every play I write is pretty planned out very specifically, but in the scene, like once you start writing and once you have the characters like talking to one another, like it can spark something else completely, like I don't know if I also wrote this play like 5 years ago. Forgive me if I don't remember specifically examples from this play, but like, you don't know what's going to happen in a specific scene. And even if you do have it planned out, it can change completely once you're writing it, because in a way, like you do like hear the voices in your head. Like I think if you know the characters well enough. and I try to know the characters well enough before I actually start writing dialogue. So
Do you play out the story in your head, like as you're writing it?
yeah,
Like,
oh, for sure. I'm a very visual reader in person. You know, there was that viral article that was going around saying that, you know, some people can't picture images in their head, and that's very surprising to me. Like when I read a novel or something, it's like a movie in my head. Like I play it.
yeah. I have the same things happen. So I have a question about your writing process. You had mentioned a little bit that it was difficult writing about the husband and like how that. Do you have difficulties in writing or writing for certain characters?
For sure.
And why? Why is that? Is it, you know?
Yeah, I mean, I think it's always difficult to write with someone you don't agree with, or you write someone who's like bad. I mean, like deliciously evil is easy, but I try not to do that. Like, I don't think I've ever written an evil character, because I want to write. So, like, I want to write fairly in a way that. So obviously, I agree with Helvetica in the argument scenes that they have, but I want to write it in a way. I want to write an argument where both people are right. You know what I mean? Like all the characters have to have flaws. All the characters have to be right in their own mind, and they have to make compelling arguments, I think, because as a playwright in general, I'm interested not in telling the audience something, but in getting the audience to question it in a way.
Yeah.
Like my ideal situation is people leaving the theater and in their car driving home and talking about it, like, and having different opinions about what they've seen. Like that is the idea, and I don't mean that in like a politically centrist way.
Yeah.
I mean that in like in a much more specific kind of way. Like, what do you think this meant? What do you think happened? Like, do you think she was right? Do you think he was right? I want to be able to ride that line in a way where people can come away with something and have different ideas. So, and again, I want to stress, like the play about John Wilkes Booth, he's never right.
He's not deliciously evil, right?
No, but like he's also not like he's not right in any situation in that play. But
right.
I feel like you can you get an understanding of him. So even in a play about somebody you know, horrible, or someone who did a horrible thing, an understanding is not necessarily sympathy, you know.
Right. Right.
So it is difficult, and especially for someone real. Like again, like I said, like just reading about his life for a year and like thinking about that guy for so long can be difficult, you know. And it is difficult, and it's especially difficult when they're you know, when that comes into play, like when you have to write from that perspective.
Right.
So yeah.
Oh, I had another train of thought, and then I got this. I was thinking about all your answers, and
Sorry.
I was playing that. No. I was listening to you, and then I forgot my question. Oh, were there any ideas that you've ever gone, oh, I'm going to write a play about this, and started, and then went, nah, this is not going to work?
There are many ideas that I've had and started and thought I'm going to write that later. I don't think there's anything that I've given up on. Like I've got a ton of plays that I've got, you know, outlines written, or even like one or two scenes written that I've, you know, I'll come back to that eventually, but I never have, you know.
Yeah.
But no, I don't think I've ever given up on a play completely.
Yeah.
Even probably not. No.
Oh, okay. Well, cool. I'm gonna ask you a couple more questions, and then we're gonna be
Sure.
done as far as things go. So, going back to our unique situation and whatnot, what do you feel like would help? You're saying that, oh, you're lucky enough that you are being paid right now, but what do you think would help other playwrights in this situation? How can our community help artists like you in that situation?
I don't know, you know. It's hard. Like all of the, you know, this is, you know, as summer comes around, that's like festival season, and so all of the festivals are canceled. Like all of the ways that, you know, playwrights on, my level, which is, that nobody has heard of, make any money really and get their work seen by people in order to get productions is by going to festivals and getting their work seen in some way. So I think it's really hard because they're all canceled. And at this point, I don't know like what's going to happen if they're going to have new ones next year, or if they're going to like combine them or what. But as far as that goes, it's very difficult. I don't know if they'll try to do anything online. Like some people are doing stuff through Zoom. I know just getting a reading done is really important for new plays, because I certainly cannot revise a play unless I've heard it. Like I said, the company in New York is putting together, we're going to do a reading of one of my new plays in a couple of weeks, so I can work on the second draft. So that's really important. And a reading is something that can totally be done on Zoom. Like, it's not perfect, but it's really, really helpful to the playwright. It might not be as interesting to an audience, but it's very, very, it's crucial, I think, to a playwright.
How many readings do you feel like you need to have before you feel like, okay, now people can produce this?
Well, Helvetica had a lot of readings. I think there's a trend, or it's not a trend as much as a kind of a necessity, especially for theater companies, because most theater companies can't afford to do a lot of plays in a season, and they can't afford to do new work that no one's heard of, that people aren't going to buy tickets to. You have to do stuff that's going to pay your rent. Outside of New York and Chicago, that is especially true. So readings are a way that companies can get new work and get introduced to new playwrights, and it's the best way that we've figured out so far, at least. So when a new play comes out that people go see a reading of, and they're in a position to get, that play produced in a way, most likely what it's going to turn into is another reading. So I think, it's on my NPX page probably, but I think Helvetica I think this is the 9th performance of Helvetica, and like the 7th, and there's like 7 or 8 readings. Like, there's been almost as many readings as there have been productions. Just because, people saw a reading and they went back to their home theater and they're like, hey, there's this play and I like it. And so they also do a reading, and then it gets read again, and then it goes to a festival and it gets read again. And there becomes a certain point where, there's diminishing returns on a reading for a playwright, because you have those early readings, so you can see what the audience engages with, see what the audience laughs at, see what the audience takes away from it by asking questions and the talk back. And then at a certain point, you're just going to get a lot of the same answers. And kind of, okay, well, there's not really anything more for me to do. I think it needs a production. And there tends to be several readings after that point in a lot of plays where you're not getting anything from the reading other than just, hearing your words back at you, which I'm not the biggest fan of. No, I'm just kidding. You're not learning anything in your like 4th or 5th reading, unless you're changing the play a lot, unless you just try something new. It's like, hey, what if I added another character or took a character away? So yeah, plays can get read to death for sure. Generally the way I write, I would 1 or 2 readings, I think, before I'd like to see it produced.
Well, that's good. Bob joined us a little bit later and said something about being influenced by Calvin and Hobbes. So he already knew that you were influenced by Calvin and Hobbes. But I will say, as far as being a playwright, for a final question here, what would you say to someone who's aspiring to be a playwright? Like, any advice you have for them, or ways to pursue this art form?
Sure.
See
and read as many plays as you can. See what people are doing. See what, there's I don't know, I may not agree with the statement, but I'm going to make it. As far as like form goes, I don't know if there's a lot that hasn't been done before, like structurally. I think we're just at a point where the playwriting art form has been around for literally thousands of years. So it's difficult to imagine that you're going to come up with a way to tell a story that's never been done before. So you can find so many ideas from reading plays, and you should always see a play if you can, but reading plays are also good. And like, just steal stuff. I mean, that every playwright I know, like, I'll say, oh, I got this from, etc. So that's the biggest thing. And try to read, authors who are very different from yourself. Try to read very contemporary plays, try to read old plays, try to just get as much of a knowledge as you can. I think as far as writing an actual play goes, my pet peeve in plays is plays that aren't really plays. In all of my plays, I try to write something that's very explicitly theatrical. Like, this could only work as a play. I try to have something in every one of my plays that could only work on stage. Like, it wouldn't be the same in a novel, and it wouldn't work in a movie. Like, it has to be a play. So that's I think that's very important. Theatricality is a very big thing for me, because so many people, I think, want to write movies and they turn it into a play, and you can tell.
Well, thank you so much. We're happy we had a chance. We got to talk with you and pick your brain a little bit, and everybody who was watching. Yeah. So where can we find you? What can we if there's any way to reach out to you or anything like that as far as playwrights go?
NPX, the New Play Network, is probably the best way, or just through email. It's on there, and it's willjcoleman@gmail. So it's pretty easy to remember.
Well, we're glad you were able to join us, and thank you so much. And we'll be hopefully talking again with you soon. But until then, stay safe and healthy in Chicago.
Yeah, stay safe, everyone.
Yeah. Thank you, everybody on Facebook.
Bye.
Bye.